Welcome to the Drift and Ramble podcast. I'm Steve Blizin. Each episode will explore true stories and American legends. From the pages of history and a few stories handed down over the years, we'll look at the people, places, and events that helped shape a nation. Stories of survival, notable frontier men and women, explorers who struck it rich, and the outlaws that stole it from them. There'll be studies of saloon girls, swindlers, banditry, and bad men, profiles of lawmen and American Indians, and the good and evil that existed between them. We'll amble through the past, we'll delve into the folklore of the times, and maybe even uncover a ghost story or two. So, saddle up, or settle in, for the Drift and Ramble podcast. This is episode 33. Buffalo Bill Cody truly became a legend in his own time. His idyllic version of the American West's golden age in history is so ingrained with what we know today, it's difficult to separate the two. Cody's Wild West show performed for audiences here in the U.S. and overseas, firmly securing the romance of the American West in the hearts and minds of those who might never have the chance to know it for themselves. William Frederick Cody's Wild West show performed for the Queen of England, for Kaiser Wilhelm, and countless counts and countrymen throughout his many overseas tours. Crowds were thrilled, outlaws were inspired, stars were born, and legends were cemented from a time that had clearly ended. According to the website carhistoryforyou.com, there were 300 automobiles in the U.S. in 1895. And by 1905, there were 78,000. By 1914, that number climbed to nearly 2 million. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show was almost as famous as the man who ran it. But the days of the real Wild West were gone forever. So what do we really know about the frontier showman who went by the name of Buffalo Bill? How did he become a living legend? And just who was the man before his rise to fame? You could sum up Cody's legendary career with a list of occupations, but that only serves to tell you what he did, not who he was. Today, we'll learn about the man, the myth, and legend, and how he came to be an icon long before his Wild West show was a reality. William F. Cody worked as a ranch hand, an Army scout, a Pony Express rider, a wagon train driver, bison hunter, fur trapper, and gold prospector. He was a Freemason and member of the Knights Templar, and of course he was a showman, a storyteller with a gift for exaggeration. But he was also an educator, an abolitionist, and a staunch supporter of equal rights for women. Cody even supported the civil rights of Native Americans and was a conservationist who advocated establishing a hunting season. Perhaps he was also a bit of an eccentric whose free spending and generosity was swiftly overshadowed by crushing debt. But underneath it all, he was a good man with a big heart and a bad set of kidneys. His story starts on a farm near the town of LeClaire in the Iowa Territory in February 1846. Cody's father, Isaac, and mother, Mary Ann, would soon move back to Ontario to be closer to the great Cody family. And by the time young William turned 8, his father sold the farm in Iowa and moved the family to Fort Leavenworth in the Kansas Territory. In 1853, this area was considered to be the gateway to the West. In the final years of the antebellum period, tensions about slavery continued to mount. Cody's father, Isaac, was fervently against slavery, and when he was invited to speak at a local trading post, his anti-slavery comments so enraged the crowd that they threatened to kill him if he didn't step down from the podium. But before he could respond, someone jumped on the stage, knife drawn. He lunged at Cody, stabbing him with his large Bowie knife. Fortunately, the wound was not fatal, and the brawl did little to change Isaac Cody's mind about slavery. Isaac Cody survived the stabbing, but he never fully recovered. From that point forward, he remained away from his home and his family as much as possible for their protection. But the Cody family continued to suffer harassment from pro-slavery activists for several years. After learning of his plans to come to visit the family, the pro-slavery activists threatened to kill Isaac Cody once again. Despite his young age, William F. Cody rode some 30 miles to warn his father. His father, now more determined than ever to change the tide against slavery, recruited some 30 abolitionist families to move to Kansas with him. But on their return trip, Cody's father took ill and later died. At the tender age of just 11, William Frederick Cody had little choice but to take his first job. Cody would become a box boy, delivering messages on horseback between the drivers and other workmen. Soon, another employee took young Cody under his wing, and they became longtime friends. That other employee's name was Wild Bill Hickok, and he was about 6 years Cody's senior. Cody claimed in his memoirs that he went on to ride for the Pony Express and completed the longest uninterrupted ride for the company when he was just 14. He claims he killed his first Indian during the Utah War and finally set off to find gold in California. Cody claims he was headed out to California when he was approached with an offer to ride for the Pony Express. Historians disagree. There's no solid evidence to support this part of Cody's story is true. And while historians have been unable to verify some of the claims and occupations Cody himself mentions in his autobiography, they were able to determine that Cody did briefly work for the parent company of the Pony Express, the transport company of Russell, Majors, and Waddell. Though Cody would recount many adventurous rides through hundreds of miles of rugged territory in the press, his real job was carrying messages on horseback back and forth between the company's office in Leavenworth and the telegraph station, which was only 3 miles away. But Cody would claim a number of illustrious occupations over the course of his young life. He states that he had been a bull whacker, a wagon master, a fur trapper and bison hunter, a prospector, a stagecoach driver, and even a hotel manager for a time. Cody was even awarded the United States Medal of Honor for his time with the U.S. military. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Young William Cody had been forced to resign from his post as a messenger when he received word that his mother had taken ill. He returned home to care for her, and by the time she recovered, he had tried to enlist with the Union Army, but was rejected because he was still too young. So, he took a job with a freight company delivering supplies to Fort Laramie. Finally, in 1863, he enlisted as a private with the Union forces and served with the Kansas Cavalry until 1865. The next year, Cody married Louisa Frederici, and though they had 5 children together, 2 died very young, and a third would not outlive her parents. Though the marriage would last throughout Cody's lifetime, the relationship was stormy from the start. Louisa didn't care for Bill's extended hunting and scouting excursions. In 1867, she convinced him to try his hand at hotel management, but the job proved far too tame for the youthful frontiersman, and he soon re-enlisted in the Army. In 1868, after impressing General Sheridan, Cody was made Chief of Scouts for the 3rd Cavalry during the Plains Wars. Here, he continued to impress both civilian and military personnel with his courage and expertise. In addition to scouting and fighting, Bill hunted bison, supplying provisions to the Army as well as the Kansas Pacific Railroad. In just 18 months, he was said to have killed over 4,000 buffalo. But unlike the rampant slaughter of buffalo caused by white hide hunters or tongue merchants who would kill only for the tongue of the great buffalo, Cody only hunted buffalo for food, and he used the very same tactics to hunt as the Native Americans did when they would hunt buffalo. a practice far more difficult and dangerous than the throngs of whites who came after Cody would employ to decimate the vast herds of buffalo that once roamed the American plains. In his later years, Cody would advocate for conservation, but by then, irreparable damage to the great herds of buffalo had already been done. William F. Cody, according to legend, won the right to call himself Buffalo Bill during a wager with a man named Bill Comstock. Cody had been scouting and hunting for the 3rd Cavalry when Comstock arrived, already calling himself Buffalo Bill. Since Cody was already under contract to kill buffalo for the Kansas Pacific Railroad and had already killed over 4,000 buffalo, he figured he was entitled to the name. So again, according to legend, the two men decided to settle the dispute through a contest. According to Cody, Bill Comstock was as proficient a hunter as any man could be, and a rightful heir to the name. He was part Cheyenne, an Army scout and interpreter, and a natural and accomplished hunter and skilled marksman. Comstock favored a fast-shooting Henry repeating rifle, while Cody preferred to shoot a large-caliber Springfield 1866 rifle he affectionately referred to as Lucretia Borgia, a notorious and beautiful Italian noblewoman rumored to be as ruthless as she was attractive. Bill Comstock preferred to hunt his quarry from the rear, firing rapidly into the herd, often chasing his prey for miles. Cody, on the other hand, preferred the method used by Native Americans, which was to ride into the middle of the herd, forcing the buffalo to separate like billiard balls, where he could then pick them off at will. Though Cody's methods were more dangerous, he was clearly productive, and he had earned the respect of the Native American scouts and guides he often found himself working with. Cody wagered that when the contest was done, the victor would forever be known as Buffalo Bill.
For 8 solid hours, we chased and corralled those buffalo until finally the dust settled and we could make our final count.
Bill Comstock had traveled over 3 miles and killed 48 buffalo, while Cody had generally remained in the same area and had killed 68. He won that contest and earned the moniker, and ever since, folks have been calling him Buffalo Bill Cody. While Buffalo Bill Cody was at work carefully crafting his frontier persona, based loosely on notable figures like Wild Bill Hickok and General Custer, he met a prolific author and showman by the name of Edward Zane Carroll Judson, who wrote under the pen name Ned Buntline. It was through Buntline's dime novels where the legendary exploits of Buffalo Bill first began to emerge. Buffalo Bill novels eventually neared 2,000 titles and spanned some 40 years. Though the stories themselves were mostly invented by Buntline, Cody himself took part as author of several of these popular tomes. The popularity of dime novels of the time, combined with Buntline's prodigious output, thrust the exploits of Buffalo Bill deep into American popular culture, and it didn't take long for Cody to seize on the opportunity and bask in the fame. Though Buntline and Cody would eventually have a falling out and part ways, Cody himself became an amalgam of fact and fiction. It was Buntline who introduced Buffalo Bill to the idea of acting out his stories in front of a live audience. In fact, Ned Buntline's live show featuring Buffalo Bill was already in production when he invited the real Buffalo Bill to witness his fictional frontier exploits being performed on the stage. Buntline convinced Cody to join the act. Though Buffalo Bill was not critically acclaimed for his acting abilities, his authentic portrayals of the Old West resonated with the audience, and the shows were generally a success. Cody had all the right stuff. He was handsome, athletic, outspoken, and dressed in the same flamboyant style favored by many of the frontier's more iconic figures. He conveyed a sense of confidence that inspired men and attracted women. But underneath the showmanship was a man with natural talent. He was an athlete, an accomplished hunter, as handy with a horse and lasso as he was with his rifle. Buffalo Bill was the real deal. He was a real scout and frontiersman, not some fictional account of one. And for a time, he straddled the line between fantasy and reality by performing his own version of the Wild West on stage during the winter months. Then, each spring, he'd return to scout and guide for the U.S. Cavalry and privately for very wealthy clientele. Between the stage, his military connections, those dime novels, and his hunting parties, he was gaining quite a reputation. But perhaps his real notoriety began when he led the highly publicized hunting expedition of the Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich of Russia in 1872. Cody had previously led a successful hunt for General Sheridan called the Millionaire's Hunt, in which Sheridan's not-so-secret plan to eradicate Native Americans was to first remove their food supplies. General Sheridan again chose Cody to lead the Grand Duke's hunt due to his proven skills as a statesman, guide, and scout, and he paired Cody with a man named George Armstrong Custer. By now, Buffalo Bill was comfortable in the role of heroic frontiersman. He was eager and fit, dashing and bold, charming and polite, spinning his own narrative into a story for all ages. Buffalo Bill was living up to his exaggerated persona whenever he was given the chance. When the Grand Duke went to hunt with Cody, press coverage was unprecedented, and Cody took full advantage of the media attention. When the hunt began, Cody graciously lent the Grand Duke his prized white horse Charlie. And during the hunt, when the Grand Duke fired at but missed his quarry, Cody quickly rode up beside the man and handed him his own fabled rifle Lucretia, and let the Grand Duke take a second shot, killing the buffalo they were chasing. A spectacle for the press as much as it was a real buffalo hunt, Cody was only one of a number of celebrated participants. During the hunt, Cody arranged a massive entertainment event with over 1,000 Native Americans performing dances and hunting skills for the Grand Duke. Perhaps not yet the refined Wild West show that Cody would best be remembered for, but the precursor was impressive nonetheless. This was proved not only as a testament to Cody's showmanship skills, but also to the fact that Cody was considered a friend to Native Americans. Cody would prove himself a brave and worthy scout, an experienced hunter, a man respected by whites and Native Americans alike, and he made lasting connections that would prove to be important figures later in his life. While Ned Buntline's fictional Buffalo Bill novels and stage plays, called border dramas, solidified the legend of Buffalo Bill, the headlines from the press helped establish this Western character as a true man of stature, adventure, and fame. Though William F. Cody officially became a showman in Chicago in December of 1872, at the age of 26, he would not start his Wild West show for 10 more years. Learning his craft alongside Texas Jack and Wild Bill Hickok in Ned Buntline's Scouts of the Prairie, Cody's authentic appearance and good looks helped the show resonate with audiences, even if some of them didn't think much of Cody's acting. It mattered little to Cody, who returned to the plains in the spring to work as a guide and scout for the U.S. military. Then, in 1872, William F. Cody was awarded the Medal of Honor for his service with the U.S. Cavalry. Now, prosperous as a showman and well known as a frontier legend, Cody was also held in high regard by military leaders for actual deeds done in the service of his country. The thin line between fact and fiction had been permanently obscured. After parting ways with Buntline, Cody opened his first show called the Buffalo Bill Combination. Texas Jack joined him once again, as did a somewhat reluctant Wild Bill Hickok. Texas Jack and Wild Bill eventually left the show, but Cody continued to expand. When he wasn't scouting, he was making a fortune, touring with a show that was in high demand. Wild Bill Hickok never felt comfortable in show business or in the spotlight, and it's said that he once even shot out a spotlight when he found himself caught in it during a performance. Hickok much preferred gambling to show business. But in August of 1876, Wild Bill Hickok was murdered doing what he loved to do most in Deadwood, South Dakota. Buffalo Bill had retired from scouting for the military in 1874, but in April of 1876, just months before friend Wild Bill Hickok would be murdered in Deadwood, tragedy struck close to home. Cody's only son, Kit Carson Cody, died from scarlet fever at the tender age of just 5 years old. Cody raced back home to be at his boy's bedside, arriving only hours before he died. Though Cody did return to the stage following the death of his son, his heart was no longer in show business. General Sheridan convinced Cody to re-enlist and join the 5th Cavalry as a scout in the Indian Campaign. Only 2 weeks later, General Custer would perish at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Cody and the 5th Cavalry were dispatched to avenge Custer's death. Though the facts get fuzzy here, it's alleged that Cody killed and scalped a Cheyenne warrior known as Yellow Hair, and gallantly proclaimed the scalp as the first scalp for Custer. As months on the frontier helped Cody heal, he began to warm up to the idea of performing again. Sitting Bull, the man credited with defeating Custer, would one day join Cody's Wild West show to reenact the battle, and that scene of the first scalp for Custer would also be incorporated into Cody's Wild West show. But Cody hadn't achieved the full potential of his Wild West show just yet. On July 4, 1882, Cody would organize the Old Glory Blowout in North Platte, Nebraska. It was a combination Wild West show and cowboy competition with over 1,000 ranch hands and cowboys that participated in competitions of shooting, riding, and bronco busting. This would become the birthplace of the rodeo, and there was Buffalo Bill at center stage. During the event, Cody himself demonstrated how buffalo were hunted. The following year, the very first official Wild West show took place in Omaha, Nebraska in 1883, and the show's circus-like mix of action, culture, and demonstrations would continue to keep crowds entertained for the next 30 years. Now, finally realizing the full potential of his Wild West show, Cody employed hundreds of Native Americans, cowboys, vaqueros, as well as livestock and exotic animals. The massive show was an instant success. Cody's unique blend of story, spectacle, and impeccable timing gave context to American history, even if the script was grossly overplayed. It was an impressive undertaking, and Cody wisely used every advantage available to him to bring the Wild West to life. According to Buffalo Bill,
when the season of 1882 to 1883 closed, I found myself richer by several $1,000s more than I ever had before, having done a splendid business at every place where my performance was given in that year. Immense success and comparative wealth attained in the profession of showman stimulated me to greater exertion and largely increased my ambition for public favor. Accordingly, I conceived the idea of organizing a large company of Indians, cowboys, Mexican vaqueros, famous riders, and expert lasso throwers with accessories of stagecoach, immigrant wagons, bucking horses, and a herd of buffaloes with which to give a realistic entertainment of wildlife on the plains. The expenses of such a show as I had determined to give were so great that a very large crowd must be drawn to every exhibition, or a financial failure would be certain. Hence I soon found that my ambitious conception, instead of bringing me fortune, was more likely to end in disaster. But having gone so far in the matter, I determined to see the end whatever it might be.
Now, with plans for his massive undertaking, Cody knew he would need assistance in matters of marketing and business strategies to lure the massive crowds he would need just to break even. Fortunately, he didn't have to look far. Among the many actors, showmen, colleagues, friends, and associates Cody had come to know was a stage actor and comedian by the name of Nathan Salisbury. Salisbury had proven himself to be a shrewd businessman, and Cody made the man an offer to be a full partner in Cody's Wild West show.
Aside from his popularity and wealth, acquired in legitimate comedy, I knew him to be a reliable friend, and withal endowed with a rare business sagacity that gave him the reputation of being one of the very best as well as successful managers in the show business. Immediately upon forming a partnership with Salisbury, we set about increasing the company and preparing to greatly enlarge the exhibition. Nearly 100 Indians from several tribes were engaged, among the number being the world-famous Chief Sitting Bull and several other Sioux that had distinguished themselves in the Custer Massacre. Besides these, we secured the services of many noted plainsmen, such as Buck Taylor, the great rider, lasso thrower, and king of the cowboys, Utah Frank, John Nelson, and a score of other well-known characters. We captured a herd of elk, a dozen buffaloes, and some bears with which to illustrate the chase.
Each show featured what is now considered standard Western fare, such as daring riders for the Pony Express, weary wagon trains attacked by savage Indians, and stagecoach robberies depicting masked bandits reenacting historical events. Gunplay, roping, and riding spectacles depicted cowboy life, while authentic Native American actors would offer a glimpse into their mysterious culture and customs to spectators of all ages. These idyllic scenes would set the stage for more dramatic action, as a narrator would link the scenes to frontier survival. Cody's famous cowboy band scored the action with appropriate mood-setting music, a recipe that would easily transition to film and television in later years. Meanwhile, Custer's Last Stand became a regular feature of Cody's Wild West show and often included actual participants from the battle from both sides.
Here we have the American Indians as they lived on the Great Plains. Their ceremonial dances appeased the Great Spirit and sometimes foretold prophecies of great hunts. Behold the mother and child as she weaves a basket from native plants. Behold the papoose, content to be near mother as she goes about her chores. But wait, a distant trumpet signals the arrival of General Custer near the tribe. Proud braves race to don their war paint in preparation to do battle. The great Chief Sitting Bull himself will now show us how he defeated General Custer.
Bring your strongest men to the place called Greasy Grass and prepare for battle. Bring all the chiefs from the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Cheyenne. Bring all the tribes together, and I will speak of the vision I have had. We will forever call this place the Valley of the Chieftains, and we will defeat the long-haired Custer, son of the Morning Star, and all his blue soldiers.
Soon, the scene would erupt into fierce battle, and the iconic General Custer would fall. The scene played so well to audiences that soon Cody was taking his troupe by train across the country, and eventually overseas. The success was overwhelming, and it soon made Cody a very wealthy man. It also spurred a number of imitators who sought to capitalize on the business of Western lore. Border shows and Western circus acts became so popular that even former outlaws like Cole Younger and Frank James tried their hands at performing. These shows helped to make celebrities out of the likes of Calamity Jane and the great Sioux leader Red Cloud. Even mountain men like Liver-Eating Johnson were said to have worked the show circuit at times. As Cody approached the zenith of his show business career, he had become the yardstick by which all other Wild West shows were measured. But it wasn't all success for Cody. He made mistakes, took incredible risks, and cast his fortune to the fates, often to never see it return. In 1884, Cody was traveling with his entire troupe when the boat they were in collided with another along the Mississippi, dumping everything and everyone into the drink. No lives were lost, but Cody's sharpshooter lost all his guns and promptly quit the show. The tragedy would open the door for Annie Oakley, and her husband Frank to join the show.
Our boat collided with another and was so badly damaged that she sank in less than an hour. In this accident, we lost all our personal effects, including wagons, camp equipage, arms, ammunition, donkeys, buffaloes, and one elk. We managed, however, to save our horses, deadwood coach, bandwagon, and ourselves. The loss thus entailed was about $20,000.
New Orleans would prove challenging in other ways as well. Crowds were not as big as anticipated, and at the end of the year, Cody and his partner Nathan Salisbury would tally up their losses at about $60,000. Still, the following season, they exceeded their expectations, and soon the men were planning their first overseas venture. The logistics alone must have been overwhelming.
Our arrangements having at length been completed by collecting together a company of more than 200 men and animals consisting of Indians, cowboys, including the celebrated cowboy band, Mexican wild riders, celebrated rifle shots, buffaloes, Texas steers, burros, broncos, racing horses, elk, bears, and an immense amount of camp paraphernalia such as tents, wagons, stagecoach, etc. We chartered the steamship and were ready to set sail to a country that I had long wished to visit. Accordingly, on Thursday, March 31st, 1887, we set sail from New York. The piers crowded with thousands of our good friends who came down to wave their adieu and to wish us a pleasant voyage. Our departure was an occasion I shall never forget, for as the ship drew away from the pier, such cheers went up as I'd never before heard, while our cowboy band played The Girl I Left Behind Me in a manner that suggested more reality than empty sentiment in the familiar air. Salisbury and I, and my daughter, Arta, waved our hats in sad farewells and stood upon the deck watching the still cheering crowd until they faded in the distance, and we were out upon the deep for the first time in my life.
In his autobiography, Cody writes about the fears the Native Americans held about crossing the ocean. They believed that a curse would befall them, causing their skin to fall off within days of their departure. This would leave them with nothing but bones that could never find a proper burial. On the first day at sea, the Native Americans, and most of the troop, found themselves with treacherous and rebellious stomachs. For 2 days they languished, able to do little more than feed the fishes, as Cody would reminisce, adding that even he himself was not immune to the rigors of ocean travel.
The whole company was too sick for any other active service than feeding the fishes, in which I am not proud to say that I performed more than an ordinary share.
Make way!
After the third day at sea, we had an entertainment every afternoon, in which Mr. Salisbury, as singer and comedian, took the leading part, to the intense delight of all on board.
The overseas tour was a grand success. Dignitaries, luminaries, and common folk crowded into packed arenas to see the spectacle of the Wild West show. Annie Oakley caused an international sensation in the press when she broke protocol and firmly shook the hand of the Prince of Wales, though the prince himself seemed quite amused. They performed for the Queen and set off to tour through France, Italy, and Germany before returning triumphantly to the United States. As Cody would later recall, a remarkable moment in history would occur when the Queen and all those in attendance would salute the American flag as the Star-Spangled Banner, not yet our national anthem, was played. This was something that Cody had been doing all along, and it's a lasting legacy to the Wild West show and Cody himself. Because if not for Buffalo Bill, we may not hear the national anthem being played at baseball games and other sporting events. It also may have been at least partly due to Cody that the song itself was selected as our national anthem in 1931. Though this would prove to be one of Cody's lasting legacies, the world was changing rapidly. When Cody returned to American soil, strange forces were at work shaping American history. Planning was underway for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, and a number of bizarre events were taking shape. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as America's first serial killer, Dr. H.H. Holmes, was busy perfecting his murderous craft. His infamous murder hotel was under construction in Chicago in preparation for the World's Fair. Though evidence suggests that Mudgett never actually opened his murder hotel to the public, that didn't stop him from making a killing. Thomas Edison had confidently boasted he'd be a shoo-in for providing electricity to the World's Fair, but his outrageous first bid of $1.7 million was summarily rejected. His bid exceeded the cost of the entire fair by some $200,000. Edison's plan was to power the fair with direct current systems and his patented incandescent bulbs. But Edison had underestimated competition from George Westinghouse, who had wisely hired Nikola Tesla, soon after Edison deceived the brilliant young inventor. Years earlier, Edison had offered to pay Tesla $50,000 to develop the alternating current system as an improvement over the DC system Edison was developing. The AC system Tesla developed proved superior, but Edison refused to pay Tesla the $50,000, claiming that he was only joking about the offer. "You just don't understand the American sense of humor," Edison said. Tesla was not amused and promptly quit working for Edison. But he continued to develop the alternating current system, which, by the way, is still in use today. George Westinghouse, along with Tesla, underbid Edison to provide power to the World's Fair, and thus eventually cast Edison out of the race to bring electricity to the masses. Meanwhile, Buffalo Bill Cody faced increasing opposition from Christian farmers and politicians, who opposed Cody's employment of Native Americans in the Wild West show. Claiming the show was disrespectful to Native Americans and a reversal of all the progress made in converting them into Christians, these religious factions were hell-bent on obliterating Native American culture forever, and Cody stood in the way. An unlikely savior, it was only through Buffalo Bill's strong connections with military leaders that he was able to keep his Indians employed and keep the show going. In doing so, he was inadvertently helping to promote, preserve, and protect Native American culture. Buffalo Bill Cody may not be the first name that comes to mind when we think about protecting Native American culture, but Cody was a contrarian on many levels. He also paid his male, female, and Native American actors fairly, at a time when most would not. As a result, he helped stave off the complete and utter decimation of Native American culture by overzealous Christian politicians. The Christians, however, were not done with Cody. They were finally successful in striking a blow to Cody's Wild West show during the planning for the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. Known as the Columbian Exposition, Cody had filed all the appropriate paperwork to be included in the Chicago World's Fair, but the planners, influenced by hyperbole from those Christian politicians, chose not to approve Buffalo Bill's application. It was a risky decision, one that could have easily bankrupted the entire World's Fair, and perhaps accidentally, it was Cody that helped ensure the fair's financial success. Undaunted by the snub, Cody simply made plans to perform in Chicago anyway. He set his Wild West show up on grounds adjacent to the grounds of the World's Fair, and the show exceeded even his own dreams of success. Not only would Cody sidestep and embarrass his detractors, he further cemented his good reputation among the people of Chicago by treating some 6,000 poor and underprivileged children to a parade and picnic before admitting them to a free performance of the Wild West show. The Wild West show in Chicago in 1893 proved to be the pinnacle of Cody's show business career. Cody's star had reached its zenith. His name was inescapable, and he was the most famous man in America, and perhaps even the world. He would continue to tour and perform for 23 years, even returning overseas to perform a second time for the Queen. His troupe and performances would thrill throngs of onlookers, while the military took notice of his logistical acumen and efficiency. Moving a show of that scale with speed and precision was indeed a thing to behold in and of itself. Then, on October 29, 1901, as the Wild West show wrapped up its final tour date for the season, tragedy struck. A railroad switch operator received a telegram to be prepared for 2 trains approaching. The first train carried Buffalo Bill and a portion of his troop, while on the second train was Annie Oakley, her husband Frank, and other members of the Wild West show. The switchman misread the instructions, allowing the first train to pass, but switching the tracks just before the second train arrived. The mistake allowed a head-on collision to occur, severely injuring Annie Oakley, and some say permanently turning her hair white. The first train, which carried Buffalo Bill, sailed past the switchman Frank Lynch, who then pulled the switch before the next show train arrived. Now, looking down the tracks through the moonlit sky, Lynch saw the approaching headlight of a third train, and he knew there would be no time to avoid a collision. Brakes squealed, sparks flashed, and the sound of iron and steel colliding filled the cool night air. Annie Oakley was on board the second train, and while no human lives were lost in the twisted metal, the crash was no less devastating.
Frank!
Annie?
I can't move, Frank. I can't move my legs.
Your hair, it's turned as white as driven snow. Here, let me help you up.
Frank. Ow! Ow! Ow, Frank. I can't. My legs won't. It hurts, Frank. It hurts.
Though no human lives were lost, Oakley was told by doctors that she would never walk again. It was also estimated that 100 or more horses were killed in the crash, along with other exotic animals and livestock. Though it was miraculous that no one had died, the show was severely crippled financially. Perhaps it was this disaster that prompted Cody's desire to diversify, or perhaps he just fell victim to his own seemingly endless success. Cody decided to expand his holdings. His bank account full, his confidence brimming, he invested as freely as he had acted as a scout and frontiersman. Brash, bold, fearless, and completely without hesitation. The strategy would eventually find him overcommitted and poorly prepared for low or no dividends. Cody was generous to a fault. He took care of his family, ensuring that all were taken care of. He was charitable, providing free admission to his shows for underprivileged children. These qualities conspired against him in later years, making him an easy target for confidence men and schemers who had no intention of making good on their claims. That same year, Cody invested in a plan that wouldn't hold much water. Businessmen George Beck and Horace Alger had purchased water rights to irrigate a large tract of land in the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming. Though none of the men held any background in the business of irrigation, they convinced Cody to join them and begin digging the Cody Canal. A company was formed and named the Shoshone Land and Irrigation Company, and Cody was made president. While Cody attempted to supervise the project remotely while traveling the United States with his show, Beck did little more to move the project forward. Their only real accomplishment was another name change to the company. Now called the Shoshone Irrigation Company, the men found the land itself so difficult to dig that men were forced to build a makeshift wooden canal above ground. The throngs of settlers that Cody had envisioned never materialized, and Eastern investors simply stopped investing. This left Cody supporting the majority of the operation. But Cody was already investing in other projects in the area. When water did finally begin to trickle in, it was well below expectations. So much so that the settlers sued. 26 plaintiffs were successful in pursuing their claims, effectively ensuring the project would never see profits. Undaunted, or possibly even delusional, Cody convinced his show partner, Nate Salisbury, to invest. But the two were never able to raise the capital required to salvage the venture. Cody finally relinquished the project to the government in 1904. And things continued to decline from there. Rumors of Cody's womanizing and heavy drinking, persistent throughout his career, became much more frequent. The stormy marriage with Louisa intensified. Cody filed for divorce, accusing Louisa of trying to poison him and making life in North Platte generally intolerable for him and his guests. Louisa fought back, countering the allegations with more of her own. Witnesses came forward in defense of Cody, one stating that he had to get drunk and stay drunk just to make life bearable. Meanwhile, Cody continued to construct the town of Cody, Wyoming, which included the first-class hotel he affectionately named the Irma, after one of his daughters. The town's population grew to nearly 500 by 1899, but nearly all of its residents were dependent on Buffalo Bill, either directly or indirectly for their income. Cody would continue to support the town, and he did his best to take credit for its success, but he was bleeding money from every pocket. In an effort to recoup his losses, Cody had also invested in gold mining operations in Arizona, but these proved to be mostly scams. Cody struggled to keep up with his commitments. Seeking an infusion of cash, he sought gold mining opportunities in Arizona with the hopes of a quick return on investment. Trusting the recommendations of his employees, he hired their relatives, who in turn simply took advantage of the man. Many historians today question if any real mining was ever actually done. Eventually, Cody's debts grew so large that he put property and possessions in his wife's name in an effort to protect it from creditors. He was forced to sell half of his business interests to a competitor. By this time, Cody had lost all touch with his youthful persona, as well as the truth. He was convinced that much of what he said and did was fact, even when it came from a Ned Buntline novel. His rocky marriage had also begun to crumble. In 1904, after 38 years of marriage, Cody filed for divorce from Louisa, citing that she had attempted to poison him and that she had made living together unbearable and intolerable. Cody had hoped to keep the news of their divorce quiet, but Louisa, of course, had other plans. Though divorce was a scandalous topic around the turn of the century, and while rumors of too much drink and womanizing continued to pop up in the headlines, Buffalo Bill only wanted the whole mess to go away. But then, with the death of their daughter Arta, Cody contacted Louisa by telegram and asked her to set all differences aside for the funeral. When Louisa refused, Cody continued with the divorce. The case dragged on as cases do, and finally, with words of wisdom only a judge could espouse, the case was closed without ending in divorce. The judge merely stating, "Incompatibility is not grounds for divorce." The couple remained married and eventually reconciled in 1910. But Cody, by now, was going broke fast. His body wasn't holding up well under the years of abuses. Though he continued to perform, his ragged countenance was such that he would sit, slouched, hidden from the view of the crowds, looking tired and bedraggled, until his name was called. Then, puffing out his chest and holding his head high, he would ride out into the stage area, beaming his famous smile, circling the audience once, before returning to his tent, where he would slide back off his mount with the assistance of staffers and return to his chair exhausted, as if that one small ride had lasted for hours. In the autumn of 1916, Buffalo Bill went to visit his sister in Colorado. During that visit, Cody was baptized in the Catholic Church by Father Christopher Walsh on January 9th in Denver, Colorado. He died the very next day, January 10th, 1917. Once one of the richest and best-known men in America, Cody died with less than $100,000 to his name. Gone was the vast wealth he was once accustomed to. Later that same year, his Medal of Honor was rescinded, along with 911 others awarded by the U.S. military. It would not be reinstated until 1989. But Cody was a 32nd degree Freemason, and he did receive a full Masonic funeral. He was to receive tributes from George V, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Woodrow Wilson. He left behind a town that continues to thrive, based mostly on tourism, driven by the man the town is named for, and his legacy is still visible throughout the American landscape. From rodeos to the national anthem being played at sporting events, it was Cody who first entwined patriotism with the Wild West. Even though the Star-Spangled Banner did not become our national anthem until 1931, Cody popularized the song, and he no doubt played a role in securing its place and becoming the national anthem. Sure, there's postage stamps to honor the man, and there's that football team out of Buffalo, New York. Yeah, it's named after Buffalo Bill Cody. You see, Cody's vision of the West is in nearly every depiction of a cowboy you've ever seen. And it's his romantic version of the frontier we see portrayed in television and movies about the Old West. William F. Cody developed his special recipe for success by mixing nostalgia for a bygone era with authentic Native American actors and his own concoction of history, patriotism, grandeur, glamorization, and exaggeration that resulted in our indelible romantic vision of the Wild West. And while his version of the West may not have been a historically accurate portrayal, Cody himself came to believe that what he was presenting was education over entertainment. But Cody's influence on America was broad and penetrating. He changed attitudes and even affected the language. Once just a lowly cowpoke, the term cowboy was just shy of an insult. Cowboys of the day were ruffians, stockhands, itinerant laborers who dealt with dirt, dust, and hoofprints. Cody elevated the status of the cowhand, and he changed the connotation of the cowboy forever. William F. Cody was an abolitionist who volunteered for the Union Army at an early age. He was an advocate of women's rights, and he respected Native Americans as the true Americans. He was generous and kind, hard-drinking, open-hearted, and possibly one of the truest heroes of the Wild West for many reasons beyond his larger-than-life persona. In the eulogy she delivered when Cody died, longtime friend and performer Annie Oakley wrote, "He was famous around the world, but the simplest of men. He was just as comfortable in the company of kings or cowboys." The Drift and Ramble podcast is presented as historical infotainment. Though every effort has been made to provide fact, some discrepancies may arise. I'd like to acknowledge the following resources: the WilliamFCodyArchive.com, Fort Leavenworth, Gateway to the West by Kenneth Lemaster, AmericasLibrary.gov, CenterOfTheWest.org, YOHistory.org, PBS.org. If you're a podcaster looking to achieve professional audio production quality, audio restoration, audio enhancement, editing, or sound design, please contact us through this podcast or our editing and engineering website at voxcutters.com. If you're in Los Angeles and looking for opportunities to start a podcast or upgrade your current recording environment, Vox Cutters offers recording facilities with a unique array of top-quality microphones and a professional recording environment. We serve the needs of podcasters, audiobook narrators, explainer videos, and online training courses. Want a quote for your next project? Visit voxcutters.com. VOXCUTTERS. voxcutters.com. I'd like to say thanks to the people who have helped out with today's show. Austin Beach, Scott Phillips, Drew Prophet, Jeremy Hennessy, and his brand new bride Danielle from Audio Oblivious Productions have all been part of this podcast since, well, for a while now. And like me, they don't get paid to do this. Same with Rhiannon and Greg McAfee, who are the driving force behind the critically acclaimed Rex Riveter Private Eye. These folks volunteer their time and talent to help this show exist. So keep that in mind when I talk about Patreon. Tossing $1 in the tip jar is one way you can show your support for this show and for the folks who make it happen. Our goal of just $50 a month covers the operational costs for our website, our streaming media account with Libsyn. I'd love to support the shows who support this podcast, and if a few more listeners can help us reach that goal of $50 a month, then I can start sending a few bucks to support these folks who have been so gracious with their time and talent. If you're a fan of the show, consider supporting us on Patreon. $1 can make a huge difference, and we'd only need 4 people to contribute $5 a month to make that $50 goal. So something to think about if you're considering supporting us on Patreon. Our Patreon page is patreon.com/driftandramble. That's patreon.com/driftandramble. If you're a Western author, we have exciting news. This year, the Drift and Ramble podcast is accepting your stories and scripts. If you have a completed story or script that is 5,000 to 7,000 words, fits the Western genre, and is free of profanity. Sorry, but we save that exclusively for behind the scenes. You can submit your story to driftandramble@gmail.com. That's driftandramble, all one word, @gmail.com. The stories will be narrated and produced by Drift and Ramble, but authors will retain all rights to their work. Want more details? Check out our Patreon page. Our Patreon page is patreon.com/driftandramble. That's patreon.com/driftandramble.
The Drift and Ramble podcast is a Clear Voice Media production.